Welcome, my dear student, to the course of object-oriented programming, which is one of the most important programming concept in the world. Today, no one can deny from the fact that how much OOP's concepts are important with respect to programming. What is basically OOP? OOP is considered as real world programming, the concept where we can represent the real world entities into computer. This approach is called object oriented programming. The concept of objects and classes basically based on the real world entities. We know that the whole world is composed of classes and objects. Each and everything in the world is an object, and each and every object belong to some classes. For example, humans class, animal class, car, vehicle class, and furniture classes. Each and everything we see there are classes in the world, and everything that we see in the world is an object. So what is basically the concept of object oriented programming? It is a way of solving complex problems by breaking them into smaller problems using objects. Before object oriented programming, there was the concept of modular programming. The programs were divided and you can say decomposed into smaller components that was called functions and subroutines and procedures. So this that approach was known as modular programming, and when a program is divided into small segments of functions and subroutines. But that was not sufficient. Therefore, we are going to use the concept of object-oriented programming, that we can represent them real-world entities into the computer world. So, therefore, object-oriented programming concepts are introduced, where each and every thing in the world can be represented through objects and classes. So, objects and classes, object-oriented programming has some basic features. For example, if you want to define what is class, so we can define class as it is the combination of objects, a collection of objects where they have internally similar properties, but externally that maybe have different properties. For example, if we take the case of animals, so animal is a class. Animal is a class, and this class has a number of such type of properties that have mainly common among their other species. But each and every species in the animal class have their own properties. Like tiger have their own properties, cats their own properties, dogs have their own properties. So class, internally they may be considered as animal class, but externally they are different with each other by size, by color, by properties. Similarly, as we see that there are a number of and all types of vehicles is considered, these belong to the class of vehicles. But a car is a separate vehicle, and truck is a separate vehicle, bus is a separate vehicle, and therefore number of motor bicycle, and etc., all other vehicles. So therefore classes and objects have their own concepts. So what is object? Object is basically a representative of a class, or you can say it is an instance of the class by which its class is recognized. For example, if you want to know about the humans, and we saw some human, we say that it belongs to the human class. And if we haven't seen any tiger or lion, and we see one of them in the zoo, we'll see all lions are like this ones. So we can just see that we can just consider and see that an object is basically an instance of class and a representative of class. Each and every object have their own components. For example, an object have data members, and now an object have data functions. Then these data members are also known as attributes or properties of the class, and these attributes and properties, we say that may be individual to the object and maybe of the class. And similarly, there are methods and events that the function they have, that may be classified into events and methods. Events are those functions of the object that are similar with the other class objects, and methods are the specified and specifics function of the class. So by this way, we say that classes and objects have their own properties, etc. And here we have discussed an example that if we take the case of a car, that a car which has data members, variables such as speed, weight, price, and functions like gear change, slow down, brake, AC function, etc., etc. So each and every object has how these two things. We have defined a class like here, class car, car, the name of the car, then speed, then weight. These are the data members of the car. And then public. And publicly we said that the brake function of the car, the slow downing of the car, and similarly AC working of the car, and etc. Other function may be defined here. So then in the main function we can define an object of the car class. For example, Ford is a type of car, so it is an object, it is a sample, it is an instance of the car class. So we can define it there like this way. So it's mean that we can define the data members of a class, and we can also define the data functions of the class that we can consider as member functions. So by this way we define in this lecture that what is class and what is object. Every object will have their own properties and function, and every class will be a combination of objects. You should know these all things. So there are some main features of the object-oriented programming. The first feature is called abstraction. Abstraction is a process of hiding irrelevant details from the users, and it's such a function of the object-oriented programming where we keep secret the irrelevant details from the users and process their functions. For example, when we send an SMS, you just type the message, select the contact, and click on them. You don't know that what is going behind the sending process, but you just click and the message has been sent to the required person. This process called abstraction. Similarly, there is a process of encapsulation. Encapsulation is the process of combining data and function into a single unit like capsule. So this process called encapsulation. Binding of data and function with each other is called, or in a single unit is called encapsulation. So in this process we combine the data with each other. The third function of the object-oriented programming is called inheritance. Inheritance is basically a function of a feature or function of the object-oriented programming where we inherit derive subclasses or child classes from their base class or parent classes. So the process of deriving subclasses from their main classes our base classes is called inheritance. Similarly, we say that when we derive or inherit child classes from their parent classes, this process is called inheritance. Inheritance has a number of types. For example, single inheritance, multiple inheritance, multi-level inheritance, and other types also. So these will be discussed in detail in the inheritance lecture. So inheritance is the process of where we derive one class from another class. For example, in this program we in the parent class we derive a child class like child. Then we derive publicly from the parent class the parent class has a variable that is equal to 100, and the child class has a variable 2 that is equal to 500. So if we just declare or create an object obj of the child class and we just run it, so it can use both the variable of the parent class and of the child class. So it is the function of inheritance where a child or derived class can use all the functions of the parent or the base class. So the next feature of the object oriented, or the fourth feature of the object oriented, is known as polymorphism. Polymorphism means a single function has many shapes. We can say that a single function can be overloaded or can be override. Overloading or overriding of a function is called what? Is called polymorphism. So it is also known as early binding and late binding. So when the function overloading is called early binding and the function overriding is called late binding. So when we can also overload an operator by this way, and we can also override a function by this way. We have taken an example here of the sum, and we said that if a single function add, we can add an integer number 1 and number 2, and also we can integer number 1, number 2, and number 3. We can also add integer number, we can also add float numbers, we can also add mixed integer and float numbers by the same function that has the same name. That is called the phenomenon of polymorphism. So these are you can say the main features of the object oriented. So that was our the summary of the today lecture, that what is object oriented programming and what are classes, what are objects, and similarly what are the main features of the object oriented programming in the form of you can say abstraction, inheritance, polymorphism. Clear? So these are the main features of the object-oriented programming. I hope that you will completely understood this lecture. And if you like if you like this lecture and you wanna receive and you wanna learn more by this way, so you should subscribe our channel for listening and watching such a type of helpful lecture in your course. Thank you very much.